Welcome to Canadiana Connection, where we celebrate Canadians everywhere with your host, Pat Williams. No matter where we spread our branches, our roots remain Canadian.
Hi, Patricia. It's nice to meet you.
Hi.
Face to face.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Yes. Fine.
We met on Twitter, right? Agility NYC?
Yes, we did.
And you are a Canadian living in New York.
I am. I have been here since 1997.
And where are you from? First, what part of Canada are you from?
I'm from Montreal, so I lived there my entire life until 1997, 14 years ago.
Are you bilingual?
Oui, je suis bilingue.
I'm
bilingual. Yes, I
am. And so in 1997, you left Montreal and went to New York City?
New York City, Manhattan, yes. Moved here with my husband.
And how was it that you came to move? Because it's not just a matter of packing your bags and deciding you're going to move to New York City, when you're Canadian anyway.
Exactly. So my husband and I are both Canadians, both from Quebec, and his job basically transferred him to New York.
Now, is he still doing the same job?
He is doing the job. They basically shut down the Montreal office and said, I have 2 one-way tickets to New York City. This was April 1st, 1997. So I thought it was an April Fool's joke, but it wasn't.
Now, what were you doing when you lived in Canada?
I was running the Quebec division of a business based in Palo Alto. So I had a sales force that covered Quebec, and we sold information management products and services.
And so that didn't affect, I'm assuming that didn't affect your job. Were you able to take your job with you, or did you have to quit?
I had to quit. There wasn't an opportunity here, so I basically left the job, came here to New York City. He had his job, was fully engaged, and I pounded the pavement looking for what I would do next.
Now, were you able to have a visa when you came immediately under whatever program your husband's company brought you in at?
No, that was the fun of it all. I had nothing. I needed to get the job first. And then the company needed to sign some documents in order for me to do the visa paperwork. So it was a little bit of a catch-22.
Hard enough to find a job to begin with, but then to ask them to sponsor you is even more difficult, correct?
Yes, and I am forever grateful to my first employer because they did hire me and they signed the documentation, allowed me to get the H-1B visa at the time, and the rest is, so to speak, history.
How long did it take you from the time you moved until the time you were able to actually work?
I moved July 4th weekend, and I started work right after Labor Day. So it was essentially 2 months from start to finish to actually walking into my brand new office.
You really pounded.
So it wasn't that long. It was good.
You must have pounded a lot of pavement. and that job was in Manhattan, in New York City?
I'm sorry?
The job was in Manhattan as well?
The job was in Manhattan on Park Avenue in Midtown, and I was beyond excited because it was like a dream come true for me. Being a Canadian and a Montrealer, here I was starting work on Park Avenue, which, is very exciting.
Very exciting, the whole move. Now, did you have children?
I did not. We moved here with 2 cats. We now have 3 children and no cats, unfortunately. So we had no children at the time.
Oh, okay. So there wasn't that at least to deal with as well.
No, and I think that was probably a blessing in disguise because I obviously was not distracted with anything. I simply was here to get a job and build a life and a career, and there was no distractions at the time.
Now, given the opportunity to make this decision again, would you make the same decision? To come to New York, leave Canada?
Yes. I mean, I miss Canada. I love Canada. I'm a proud Canadian and talk about it all the time. But I think for my family, the opportunities here are better for us at this stage of our lives.
Now, I'm assuming you had mentioned your first job, so I'm assuming you're not doing the same thing now that you were doing back when you first immigrated.
I am. I began working for a very large executive recruiting firm that taught me the executive recruiting business, essentially, and I have been doing that ever since. Now I'm running my own firm, but I am still doing exactly the same thing as I did when I arrived here.
So you have an executive search firm that you started yourself. When did you set that up? When did you decide to be an entrepreneur?
I started it in October of '08, right in the midst of the recession and the Wall Street crisis. So I started at a very difficult time, but for a variety of reasons, it was the right timing for me, and I have been doing it just 3 years now. It's my yearly anniversary this month, so it's been 3 years.
I just realized you were in Manhattan on 9/11.
Yes, I was. I was actually pregnant with my twins. I was working in Midtown. Yeah. I was working in my office in Midtown, and we were evacuated and walked down 47 flights of stairs and home with the rest of the dazed and traumatized New Yorkers. It was a horrible experience. As a matter of fact, shortly thereafter, I want to say about 3 or 4 days, my husband and I got in the car with our daughter. We went to Canada. We went to Montreal because we needed to get out of this city.
Yeah, I remember my husband, I'm divorced now, but my husband at the time was in Canada when it happened. And I picked up the phone and begged him to come home because I had heard that the borders could possibly be closed and I was not allowed to work. I had no income, so I didn't know how. He was just there on pleasure as opposed to work, so he wouldn't have been able to work if they had closed the borders. And it was a panic being a Canadian here at that time. Thank goodness I wasn't in New York, and I just can't imagine going through what New Yorkers went through at that time, and the people who lost family. It was devastating for me, so far removed as it was for. I went to school and took my kids out of school.
It was a very scary time, and I think New Yorkers who were here, many of them have some mild sort of post-traumatic stress issues about that. And think about it. It's hard to not, think about it when you go into a building or, the whole city has changed in terms of security. Now you need you need an ID card to get into most major buildings, office buildings you never did before. So there's been a lot of changes, and I think it's hard to ever forget that kind of horrible devastation that we experienced.
Now post 9/11, did you ever once consider going back to Canada, that it was too unsafe here in the States?
Yes, excuse me, many times. There's always the fear of what happens. I mean, New York is a big target, and it's always in the news, and, when they find something going on in terms of potential terrorist threats, they're always talking about New York. So you sort of live with that, but it hasn't been compelling enough to actually pick up and leave, although we did get my children Canadian passports in the event that they should ever want to leave. We have another country as an option.
So your children are dual citizens?
They are, yes. So they're very happy about that, although they are proud New Yorkers.
Did you get your American citizenship too, or?
I have the paperwork. I haven't done it. I'm the only one. My husband has his dual citizenship, and I'm sort of the procrastinator because, I don't know, I guess it's not as important to me as it was to him, and I'm very happy to be a Canadian, and I guess eventually I need to get around to doing it.
I got my American citizenship because I felt I should. I was taking advantage of, all the American opportunities here. But I gave my children the choice, and they have not gotten their American citizenship. They identify themselves. I think they get a lot of attention being the Canadians.
Right.
So that's part of who they are. Now, eventually they might. I don't know, but
good to have. You never know.
So how are you liking running? I'm sorry, I totally got off topic on 9/11. I didn't even think about that until we were mid-conversation. How are you liking running your own business in the U.S.? And do you think you would have the same opportunity in Canada, in Montreal, to run this business? Do you have a preference about where you run it? Or is there something about your business, perhaps, that makes it unique to New York City?
I think, I can run this business virtually, so it doesn't actually have to be in New York, although it's very convenient because major decision makers are here in New York, and if they're not, people travel to New York regularly, so no matter who I speak to, the question can always be, when are you coming to New York? And most times people have an answer to that question. It's interesting. So in business, at least, people are either here or they're coming here at some point in the near future. So it works out well because it's very convenient. Could I run this business in Montreal? Probably not. I could run a smaller business, but I could not, it's the United States or a land of opportunity, right? The numbers are astronomical. So you can, take a piece of the pie, and it could be a sliver, but it's still rather large compared to what there is in Canada. That being said, I'm always looking in Canada. So in my job, I look for talent to put into opportunities. I constantly find myself looking in Canada because I feel like in the United States, we easily overlook the great talent we have in Canada. So I call it my Canadian content that I put on every search that I do. And I do make a habit of looking there to see who might be there and who might be interested and appropriate for an opportunity.
Do you only work in one particular market segment, like financial, or is it any executive, any industry, any business?
I do senior level, so it's quite senior. It's usually C-level, so that means a CEO, a COO. I specialize a great deal in boards of directors, so corporate boards. I put them together. I recruit either one board member or several for corporations that need new board members. So that's where I tend to specialize, and I do it in a variety of industries, although I have a particular interest in technology and in manufacturing.
Very interesting. So your ideal person or ideal company would be, do you have an example? Maybe a company earning with sales over a certain amount, or?
I tend to work with mid-cap companies, so that would be anything from a couple of $100 million to a couple of $1 billion. So it's a broad range, and I've certainly worked at smaller and larger, but I tend to find most of the clients, I tend to match up best with mid-cap companies, now, both public and private.
Do you get a lot of individuals who are looking for greener pastures contacting you and asking you to find a potential match for them?
Absolutely. So the last few years, as we know, has been brutal for people. Many extremely qualified people without a job, but, for the first time maybe in their entire career. It's been very hard for them, and I have tried to work with some of them, although the way my business works, I get hired by companies to find the person. But I always try and be helpful to the people who are looking for a job simply because that's what I want to do. So it's not the way the business model works, but I try and do it because that's what I want to do as well.
Speaking of brutal times that we're living in, are you finding that there are fewer positions that you're looking to fill?
Are there fewer positions?
Or is it that you're in such a niched industry that it's remained constant for you?
It was actually a little bit more difficult 2 years ago, even a year ago. I think that right now, actually the Wall Street Journal had an interesting article a couple days ago on how companies cannot find talent. So they have the jobs, but they can't seem to find the talent. And that's sort of a brand new luxury, actually. We'll call it a luxury because it's very nice to hear that. So I think that hiring and opportunities have picked up ever so slightly recently. So there are more jobs, and I am busier than I was a year ago or even 2 years ago.
What we'll do at the end is you can tell people how they can contact you if they'd like your services. But I want to first ask you what you love most about living in New York City.
What I love most about about living in New York City. The pace is amazing. It's sort of always two sides. It's like a double-edged sword. So I love the pace, but it's also exhausting, and you need to sort of try and escape it when you can. I love the broad opportunities in terms of culture and art and theater and restaurants. So there's no end to the possibilities of things you can do. As soon as you think you've hit them all, there's all these new opportunities or new restaurants so that's incredible. And it's hard to find that elsewhere. I think, as a mother of 3 children, I think the educational opportunities are unbelievable. People often say you're raising kids in New York City, and I'm like, yeah, there's actually, it's a wonderful place to do it because they go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art the way other kids go to, to the park. So for them, they have great opportunities. They're living a completely different life than I did growing up. So that's very exciting. And so education is amazing for them, and classes. And whatever their interest is, they can find somebody to teach them almost anything.
In New York City, is it private schools? Is that how most people send their children to school? Is it through, in Manhattan anyway, is it private schools, or are there good public schools there?
It's excellent public schools. Depends on what type of education you want. A lot of people take the public school route until middle school, and then they switch to a private school. Mm-hmm. Many different ways to do it. There are amazing, both obviously public and private schools, and many opportunities, single-sex, co-ed, more progressive, more conservative. So there's all types of different opportunities for children to have different types of education. It's a choice. There's many choices.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I've always wondered about when you have small children, it's, when you live in the suburbs, it's really easy to open the door and say, go play. You can't really do that in New York City. How do you, where do the kids run? And do you always have to be with them? It's got to be intense parenting.
Good questions. Very good questions. Yes, you have to, you are with them until they get to be, teenagers, and then they don't want you with them, and that becomes, that's a big question now because my daughter is 11, and when do you let them sort of walk by themselves outdoors? But until recently, we were always with them, and they ran around. The park becomes their backyard. So kids growing up in Manhattan think that they don't know what a backyard is sometimes, and they go to the park. Or my kids run up and down in our hallway. It's a very funny situation, but they will spend a fair bit of time in my apartment building playing in the hallway, which my neighbors don't mind, but I guess it's, it depends on the building that you're in. But that becomes also an extension of their home and their backyard. So it's an interesting, different way of letting out your energy.
Yeah. Thank you I've always wondered about that. I've never known a New Yorker with children, so.
Yeah.
What do you miss most about Canada?
I miss a lot about Canada. I miss the pace. It's a more, I don't want to say civilized in a negative way, but it's a nice pace of life. The quality of life tends to be different. People are not as obsessed with their jobs, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but people tend to have a more balanced view of the way life should be. I, in particular, miss the Quebec culture, which, although I'm an Anglophone, it's still my culture, and it is different in many ways, and, spending most of my life there, I do miss many aspects of that, the bilingualism, which I know, I look for opportunities to practice my French, but I don't get them that much of them. Canada tends to be less commercial, so I miss the less commercial nature of things, holidays like Valentine's Day, and here, it's huge. In Canada, we have a sort of more quieter approach to these things, and miss the obsession with hockey.
They've got it here in Detroit.
Yeah, well, hockey is not as, I don't know, the kids don't play hockey the way they do at home, so one of my sons is a hockey player, and miss that obsession, for better or for worse.
You keep cutting out.
I don't know if that is, but...
Oh, okay. Sorry, you were cutting out there. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Okay.
I heard your son in hockey, and then I didn't hear anything after that.
I have a son who plays hockey. We try and keep ourselves honest here by, doing some things that are typically Canadian.
Now, do you discuss Canada with your kids? Do you talk about what it was like to live there? Do you teach them any history? Do you teach them anything about Canada? Or do you do that through trips back home?
All of the above, completely. They have books on Canada. We have cookbooks from, using maple syrup recipes. When they were younger, I used to go into their school annually and do a session with the teachers' help and permission on Canada. So not only do they know about Canada, but their classmates know completely. They're all Canada experts because for the first, let's say, 5 or 6 years of school, so grades kindergarten up through grade 5, I would go in once a year with maple cookies that I would import from Canada, and activities, and depending on the age, and different types of activities and educational materials for them on Canada. So I would say I've influenced many children in this city and made them far more knowledgeable on Canada because it's important to me. So.
And I found that I did the same thing when I lived in Columbus, Ohio. I had an annual Canada Day party, and it involved trivia contests and costumes and different foods. Do you make tortilla?
No.
And
sugar pie, which is a Quebec specialty that my mother-in-law used to make. So we have made it, and we have brought it into my kids' schools, and now sugar pie is not just a thing that they know about in Quebec. Many kids know about it here.
And my point was definitely going to be that although we have left Canada, still love Canada, we actually have become ambassadors. And I have shared a lot of knowledge about Canada with people that I've come in contact, and obviously you have too. I'm curious as I start to do more interviews to see if that's a consistent thread among the interviewees.
Yeah, for me, it's 100%. I mean, everybody who knows me, it's easy, and I guess it's easy to come off because we don't have the accent, we don't look different, so it's easy to be taken for an American.
Unless we say about.
Yeah, exactly. So I find it, my personal mission is to make sure that I am recognized as a Canadian, and that if people don't know about Canada, I feel very proud to tell them and encourage them to go also, because for us here in New York, you get on 87 North, you go for 6 or 7 hours, you're in Montreal. So I'm constantly telling people, take the trip because you won't be sorry.
Oh, it's like going to Montreal is like stepping into another world. Going to Quebec. It's even from Ontario where I lived and I traveled to Quebec, I couldn't believe it was in Canada. It felt entirely different. Beautiful. And so did you celebrate Thanksgiving this month?
No. But I never celebrated. I didn't celebrate it in Canada. It was sort of a quiet holiday for us. I don't know how it was. In Quebec, it wasn't really a big deal. So I didn't celebrate it there.
Oh, that's true. I remember reading that Quebec does something a little bit different.
Yeah, it was no. I was actually sadly, or I don't know for what reasons exactly, but it really is not a holiday that people in Quebec celebrate it.
That's right. I did cook my turkey and stuffing and do all that, and I'll do it again in November.
Celebrate twice.
Yeah, a turkey twice.
Exactly. What could be bad, right?
So was there anything else we got off topic from what you miss about Canada? Was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that I miss, Canada has a very good, Canadian people are very well received everywhere. So it's very nice when I speak about Canada that people are, people like Canadians. So I feel very privileged to be part, obviously, of that group, but yet I'm here capitalizing on the opportunities of this country and the great people also. So I think it's the best of both worlds.
Absolutely. I miss Shreddies.
Well, yeah. There's all kinds, I have Montreal bagels in my freezer right now, and I make sure I have a regular stock of them because in Montreal we have our special bagels, and New Yorkers really don't appreciate that, but I keep my personal stash here and take them very carefully for special occasions and eat them. It's yes, it's a crazy thing, but my kids have actually become fans of Montreal bagels, even though they're true New Yorkers.
So now, if you had an executive working out of Vancouver or Toronto that was looking to potentially work in New York City and willing to relocate, do you help direct them with immigrating into the States? Is there any advice that you give them in the process, or do you does the company do that?
Generally, the company does that, although informally, I always talk to people about that. So yes, although I don't get involved in the immigration process, and I'm certainly no expert on what needs to be done, but I talk about it in general terms.
Very good. So if somebody from Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal would like to hopefully get a job in New York, how would they contact you?
They can contact me via email is best, because I love to see a resume. So email address plenkov, Lenkov, @agilityexecutivesearch.com. It's all on my website, which is agilityexecutivesearch.com.
And we'll add that to the video as well as on the website as well. So people will be able to access it that way too. A link to your website. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I love talking to other Canadians and finding out what it's like living elsewhere for them, whether it's the United States or other places in the world, and I find it very interesting to discover what they've chosen to do and why they've come. So thank you for allowing me that information and for connecting with you, and good luck with everything.
Thank you very much, Pat. It was great to talk to you, and I agree. I love to talk to people and Canadians in the United States. So it's great to meet you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, and if people want to get to know you better and connect with you online, you're on Twitter at AgilityNYC.
Exactly.
Correct? Okay.